My friends, good day. The French government has just taken a hit, a slap regarding this €2 tax on parcels coming from outside the European Union. Understand, that's an understatement. Understand, it's from China. So what they did is they decided that every parcel coming from China will be hit with a €2 tax for each item inside. So they're going to open it, look inside, USB cable, €2, mouse, €2, batteries, €2, and so on. So what they did is they imagined in their little heads that this would bring them millions of euros, which they could waste and spend again, as usual, on taxi fares, meals, gifts, and so on. Well, it turned out very badly. But they should have learned their lesson. They should have known. They should have known, because in 2024, they made the same mistake. In 2024, they said, let's introduce a tax on yachts. They went out to sea, they looked, okay, there are yachts. They took out an Excel sheet. So if we collect between 20,000 and 200,000 euros in taxes per yacht, that'll give us 10 million a year that we can spend on entertainment expenses as usual. The problem is they introduced the tax. The next day they looked through binoculars and there were no more yachts. They had all left. They set sail, they cleared out, they went somewhere else. So instead of bringing in 10 million the tax, it brought in 60,000 euros. 60,000 euros. That's probably people who hadn't read the newspaper, who didn't know, who parked there, and then bam, they got hit with the tax out of nowhere. But after that, once they've been burned, they won't come back, those people. So after a year or two, it won't even be 60,000 euros, it'll be exactly zero. But be careful, we're in a lose-lose situation here. Why? Because what happened is that not only did the state gain nothing, but the locals lost out as well. Why? They arrive, well, they're going to bring in a mechanic for the diesel that's making noise. They're going to go to the local butcher or the local supermarket or somewhere else and then buy provisions for their yachts. They're going to hire people, etc. So there's a local economy that runs on that traffic. That traffic is gone. So suddenly, overnight, the order book drops to zero. So we're in a destructive state. So this whole yacht story is that they used to, if you will, target people who didn't have a choice. For example, you take the residents, they're going to raise the housing tax on them. They're going to say, well, we're going to take more. So they raise their housing tax. They can't leave and must pay no matter what, even if it means not upgrading their car or sending their kids to school with worn shoes, it doesn't matter. They have to save money even on their food to pay the state, which spends it however it wants. Well, the difference between a yacht and an apartment is that an apartment is called immovable property. That means it doesn't move. The yacht, on the other hand, moves, it leaves. You see? So now they've started this whole tax thing. And literally after a few days, traffic dropped by 90%. Nothing goes through France anymore. It's over. The remaining 10% are just companies that didn't have time to reroute their traffic. But probably in the coming weeks, they'll take care of it. And after that, the traffic will simply drop to zero. You know, I talk to people who work in logistics. How do they change the routing of a container, for example, or the routing of goods or a tanker or something else? How do they change it? Because the world is very unstable. There are a lot of routes. Sometimes you have wars, sometimes you have laws, sometimes you have obstacles, sometimes you have taxes, all that. How do they change that? It's just with the mouse, you just have to drag the path. They change the path like a video game. And then the routing changed. That's it. It's as simple as that. So France becomes a hostile country. It's simple. You just click there, you change. Route it through Amsterdam or Poland or somewhere else, it doesn't matter. And bam, it's done. The MAN department invested 400 million in a new logistics infrastructure. Well, that infrastructure is done for. It's doomed to rust. It's doomed to be covered in pigeon droppings. It's over. The people who work there will probably lose their jobs. So actually, the thing is, let me tell you something. You know, when I was a kid in Algeria, I remember the newspapers talking about the European Union, with France leading the way, coming hand in hand with the IMF, wanting to impose on us what they called a market economy. Open your economic borders. Let goods circulate, let money circulate. Let businesses move freely. What are they doing with that? That's economic predation. So they go to countries in the south and tell them, open your markets so that globalized goods owned by financial powers can enter destroy local jobs, destroy local businesses, and create unfair competition for them with systems that are globalized, with large volumes, with dumping and all that, so that the locals are just crushed. They can't fight against that. But be careful, this globalization suddenly doesn't suit them anymore when it goes the other way around. That means when it's about, well, people come to sell in their country. I mean, make up your mind. At some point, you have to be fair. Personally, if you ask me, I'm against globalization in both directions, but you can't have it only one way. I would like people to be able to produce locally, for jobs to be created locally, you see, so that people can have money to buy local products. Because right now, we've unbalanced the economies. People can't buy local. If you take a USB cable in China, it'll cost you €1.90 in China. If you make it in France, it'll cost you 150 euros, because when you look at all the deductions, the taxes, the regulations, and remember, regulation is a tax. Because regulation, if you have to comply with the regulation so they let you work, otherwise they fine you or shut you down or something else, you have to pay. So regulation is a tax, which means that basically they prevent you from working in a country. So they drove out all the industries in France, for example, they're gone. We're experiencing extremely pronounced deindustrialization. So on top of that, once countries deindustrialize, what happens? The people who are there have less work, have less purchasing power. Obviously, because we have to bring everything from abroad and pay other nations while we have less and less work. Especially when we're stuck with a state that has this habit of confiscation. So people who buy from China, they're not buying from China because they're enemies of their own country. That's not it. They buy from China because if they couldn't buy the same product from China, they simply couldn't buy it at all. That's it. It's as simple as that. So what do? The government comes in like a pirate in the middle of the road and says, I want to take a cut. What are you going to do with that money? No, but seriously, when the government takes those €2, what is it going to do with them? Is it going to create jobs in France? They're going to waste it. It just goes to champagne. It goes to luxury watches, to custom-made shoes. That's what it's going to be spent on. So the thing today is we've reached what's called the Laffer curve. But then, where the Laffer curve used to say that too much tax kills revenue, today France had barely started to introduce a tax and everyone was already gone. Of course, why? Because they know one thing. When new taxes are introduced, when new confiscations are launched, well, often they're introduced with fairly low rates that will be increased later. So the €2 tax was going to become the €3 tax, then the €4 tax, then 5, then 10. So people say to themselves, it's better to start changing habits right away. Because we can't submit, we can't let our customers get extorted. So if the customer gets extorted, they'll buy less from us. So what's going to happen is that we'll react right away before it becomes a 5 or 10 euro tax, you see. Now, the same products are entering through other parts of the European Union. We can't tax at the borders of the European Union anyway. We can't. It's not possible. Because that's right, there are no borders inside the European Union, so we can't tax. That's settled, you see. So the jobs that were lost in France will be created in Amsterdam, will be created elsewhere, and that's it. And then distribution will continue as before. There you go. The Chinese might lose, well, instead of seeing their customers pay €2 per product, they'll probably lose, let's say, maybe €1 per package. It's already cheaper since they take a slightly longer route, but that's not a big deal. It's better to lose €1 per package than to end up seeing your customers not coming because they're being ripped off. That's it. It's as simple as that. And then you realize that there are still people running the country who are economically illiterate. They have absolutely no understanding of economics. They think they can keep taking without consequences, believing people will just pay. Today, the taxes exceed those that existed during feudal times and even those in the USSR era. I mean, we have sprawling states that have become cancerous. In the United Kingdom, I see that today we have a family with 2 parents and 3 children who live off the public sector. Well, they make a better living when you look at everything they receive from the benefits paid for free. They get a house, they get money, they get lots of checks, lots of things, than someone who earns £140,000 a year. You see what I mean? It means you take high-level jobs that might require 12 years of university. Well, you can do much better by staying at home and watching TV. There you go. You see what the government is doing? It's destroying nations. I mean, that's it. Anyway, my friends, thank you for watching this video right here. And then subscribe. Don't hesitate to subscribe, because I notice sometimes most of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. So support me by subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. See you very soon.